Why was Che Guevara, a doctor turned guerrilla, once considered America's most wanted man? Why does the CIA want him dead? And why do thousands of One Piece fans believe this same revolutionary was the real-world inspiration for Monkey D. Dragon, the leader of the Revolutionary Army? Today, we're separating the myth from the man, the T-shirt icon from the executioner. Before he was a symbol, Ernesto Che Guevara was an Argentine medical student. His 1952 motorcycle journey across South America exposed him to poverty and inequality that radicalized him politically. But that same journal, later published as the Motorcycle Diaries, is also where critics say his early prejudices show. Guevara wrote disparaging descriptions of black communities he encountered, drawing sharp contrasts with Europeans he considered more civilized. Supporters argue his views evolved after later visiting Africa in the 1960s. Critics say the writings reveal attitudes that never fully disappeared from Cuban policy under his influence. After Fidel Castro's forces toppled dictator Fulgencio Batista in January 1959, Guevara wasn't given a ceremonial post. He was named commander of La Cabaña fortress, a centuries-old Spanish colonial garrison overlooking Havana Harbor, and within weeks, the epicenter of revolutionary justice. There, Guevara personally oversaw the tribunals of hundreds of former Batista officials, police officers, soldiers, and accused informants. These weren't civilian courts. They were closed-door revolutionary tribunals, often held late at night, with verdicts frequently decided in minutes. Guevara made his philosophy on this explicit. He argued that formal judicial proof was an unnecessary, archaic bourgeois detail, that revolutionary conviction alone was enough to justify a sentence. Defendants at La Cabaña often had no real defense counsel, no right to appeal, and no meaningful chance to contest the charges against them. Historians and human rights researchers estimate the executions carried out under his command ran into the hundreds during 1959 alone, though exact figures remain genuinely disputed among historians, with estimates ranging depending on the source and what counts as a trial versus a summary execution. It's this period that earned him the nickname still used by critics today, the Butcher of La Cabaña. Guevara's intolerance wasn't limited to political enemies. It extended to Cuba's LGBTQ+ community, and one case in particular is often cited by critics. Virgilio Piñera was one of Cuba's most celebrated writers, an openly gay playwright, and poet whose work had already drawn international acclaim by the time the revolution triumphed. Piñera's sexuality made him a target under the new government's vision of the new man, a Cuban archetype, built on militarized machismo that had no room for anyone deemed deviant. In 1961, Piñera was swept up in a wave of arrests targeting Cuba's so-called 3Ps prostitutes, pimps, and pajeros, slang for gay men. He was detained by police, interrogated, and released, but the harassment followed him for the rest of his life. 2 years later, when Guevara spotted one of Piñera's books on display at the Cuban embassy in Algiers, he reportedly referred to the celebrated writer with a Spanish slur for faggot, a moment historians point to as characteristic of the government's institutional homophobia. This is the same climate that produced the UMAP camps in 1965, forced labor camps where thousands of gay men, along with religious minorities and dissidents, were interned and subjected to abuse and re-education in the name of building ideologically pure revolutionaries. It's a legacy Fidel Castro himself would later call a great injustice decades after the damage was done. Guevara wasn't satisfied with one revolution. He wanted dozens, spreading simultaneously. At the 1967 Tricontinental Conference, he called for the creation of 2, 3 mini-Vietnams across the globe, a strategy designed to stretch American military resources so thin that U.S. power would collapse under its own weight. It wasn't just rhetoric. In 1965, Guevara quietly left Cuba to personally lead an armed Marxist insurgency in the Congo. When that campaign collapsed within months, he moved on to Bolivia, determined to ignite a continent-wide revolution from its jungles. Years earlier, during the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, Guevara had reportedly urged Soviet officials to consider launching nuclear weapons at the United States if Cuba controlled them directly. He later told a British journalist that the cause of socialism would have been well worth millions of atomic victims, a statement that, to American intelligence, confirmed he was not a man who could be negotiated with. To Washington, this made Guevara uniquely dangerous, not a symbol to be countered with propaganda, but an active, mobile threat to every pro-Western government in Latin America. The CIA responded by deploying paramilitary advisors to train and equip Bolivia's Army Rangers specifically to hunt him down. One of those advisors was Felix Rodriguez, a Cuban-born CIA operative who had fled Cuba as a teenager after the revolution and later fought at the failed Bay of Pigs invasion. Rodriguez spent months in the Bolivian jungle helping interrogate captured guerrillas and piece together Guevara's location. On October 8, 1967, that intelligence paid off Bolivian forces cornered and captured a wounded Guevara in the ravine of Quebrada del Euro. The next day, Rodriguez sat face-to-face with Guevara in a small schoolhouse in the village of La Higuera. By his own account, Rodriguez wanted to keep Guevara alive for further interrogation, but Bolivia's president had already ordered his execution. Now, let's talk about the comparison between Che Guevara and the One Piece anime character Monkey D. Dragon. But here's where the comparison sharply breaks down, and where fans argue Oda may be making a deliberate statement. Guevara, as we've covered, operated within a movement that criminalized and persecuted gay men, from Virgilio Piñera to the thousands interned in UMAP camps. Dragon's revolutionary army stands in stark contrast. One of Dragon's most powerful commanders and closest allies is Emporio Ivankov, the openly queer, gender-fluid queen of the Kamabaka kingdom, who leads an entire nation built as a haven for people rejected elsewhere for their identity. Ivankov isn't a background character. He's a founding-level figure in the Revolutionary Army's command structure, trusted enough to have personally saved Luffy's life. Where Guevara's revolution built camps to punish those it deemed deviant, Dragon's revolution is partly led by one. If Oda did draw from Guevara as inspiration, the choice to give Dragon an ally like Ivankov reads less like a coincidence and more like a pointed correction, keeping the revolutionary aesthetic while rejecting the intolerance that came with the real man. Creator Eiichiro Oda has never officially confirmed Guevara as a direct inspiration for Dragon, and Dragon's design and demeanor likely draw from multiple real-world revolutionary archetypes. But the thematic echo, right down to where the fiction diverges from the history, is exactly why this theory has stuck around in fan communities for years.